My nephew Marcus called on a Tuesday evening, 41 years old, long-haul trucker, reliable as a grounded circuit. His voice carried the same weight mine did, calling in a bad fire. "Uncle Hank, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I just saw Rachel." I set down the brass extinguisher I'd been polishing. Rachel had been dead for 3 years. "Cabin 7, Marcus said. "Pine Ridge Resort. That old fishing place off Route 9. She was tending flowers on the porch. Flowers. My wife Janet taught her that." One click on subscribe and a comment with your city helps more than you know. Thank you for watching. I spent 33 years walking into burning buildings for the Collinsville Fire Department. I can tell you within an hour whether a fire was set or accidental. I married Janet Purcell when I was 24. I'm 65 now, and both of them, the job and Janet, are gone. That phone call from my nephew Marcus changed everything. But to understand what it broke, you need to understand what I'd built and what I'd already lost. I joined the department at 22, fresh out of a 2-year technical program where I learned more from the hands-on labs than any lecture. First day at Station 3, Captain Welch handed me a pike pole and pointed at a smoking warehouse on 4th Street. "Don't die," he said. That was my orientation. I spent the next 3 decades learning to read fire. Not fight it. Read it. The V marks on a wall tell you where the flames climbed. The char depth tells you how long they burned. Or patterns on a concrete floor tell you someone wanted that building gone. I earned my arson investigation certification at 45, and after that, I could walk into a collapsed structure and tell you within an hour whether the fire was accidental or staged. Every fire has a signature. You just have to know how to look. I married Janet when I was 24. She was 22, working the front desk at the county clerk's office, and she had this way of looking at you over her glasses that made you feel like the only person in the room. We bought a Cape Cod on Elm Street for $62,000. 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, a kitchen that needed everything. I rewired it myself. Tore out the old knob and tube, ran new Romex through every wall. Janet painted the cabinets while I cut the drywall. We added a bedroom when Derek came along. Added a second bathroom 3 years later. Room by room, year by year, we turned that house into something that would last. Janet was the warm center of the family. P.T., president 3 years running. Church choir every Sunday. She made pot roast on Sundays with carrots and red potatoes and gravy thick enough to stand a spoon in. The whole block could smell it by noon. She managed our finances, kept the books tight, planned for retirement before I'd even thought about it. She was smarter than me about money. Smarter than me about most things, if I'm honest. Derek was born in the summer of 1988. 8 pounds, 4 ounces, full head of dark hair. I held him in the hospital and thought, this is what it all means. The double shifts. The overtime. The Christmas Eves spent at the station because somebody had to be there. All of it for this. He was a charming kid. Teachers loved him. He could talk his way out of detention, into the starting lineup, through any door that should have been closed. Quarterback in high school. Homecoming king. Full scholarship to state. Janet and I drove him to campus on a Sunday morning in August, helped him carry boxes up 3 flights of dorm stairs, and I shook his hand in the parking lot, because I didn't trust myself to hug him without crying. That scholarship was worth $120,000 over 4 years. Except it didn't last 4 years. Derek lost it sophomore year. Bad grades, missed classes. He never told us. I found out 15 years later from a financial aid statement that showed up in a box of his old paperwork. By then, Janet was already gone. By then, I was already paying. The lies were never dramatic. They were quiet. Small. The kind that only worked because you trusted the person telling them. After college, he bounced. Sales jobs, mostly. He had the smile for it, the handshake, the way of making you feel like you were the only customer who mattered. But something always went wrong. A missed quota. A conflict with a manager. A better opportunity somewhere else. He'd last 18 months, maybe less, then show up at Sunday dinner talking about the next thing. Janet would look at me across the table, and I'd look at my plate. When Rachel married Derek 12 years ago, I thought maybe she'd steady him. She was 22, shy, from a working-class family in Barton County. Her father carried mail for 30 years. Her mother ran the front desk at Barton Elementary. Good people. Quiet people. Rachel had this crooked smile that came out when she wasn't expecting it, and a crescent-shaped birthmark below her left ear that she used to cover with her hair, until Janet told her it was pretty. Janet taught Rachel to garden, showed her how to test the soil, how to space the rows, how to talk to tomato plants like they were listening. Rachel called Janet Mom within a year. She called me Pop. For a few years, standing in our backyard watching Rachel and Janet bent over the flower beds while Derek played with baby Tyler in the grass, I thought the family was whole. I thought we'd made it. We hadn't. Derek's debts started small. Credit card balances that carried over month to month. A car loan that stretched past 5 years. Then, the sports betting. He'd sit on the couch during football season with his phone in his hand, thumb working the screen, and I'd watch his jaw tighten on every third down conversion. He owed bookmakers. He owed friends. He convinced 2 drinking buddies to invest in a bar on the east side of Collinsville. A place called Mulligan's that lasted 8 months before the health inspector shut the kitchen down. When I added it up later, after everything, the total came to around $60,000. $60,000 in holes, and Derek kept smiling. 3 years ago, Rachel drowned. That's what they told us. That's what I believed. A Sunday afternoon at Lake Marion, the western shore where the water runs deep and the visibility drops to nothing below 4 feet. Rachel took a small aluminum boat out alone. The boat capsized. Her life jacket was found floating near the shore, unclipped. Her windbreaker surfaced 2 days later, caught on a submerged branch. No body. Lake Marion has a silty bottom and unpredictable currents. The county dive team searched for a week and found nothing. Derek filed the missing persons report. He sat in Detective Ruiz's office with red eyes and shaking hands and told her Rachel had been depressed. Said she'd been talking about wanting time alone. Said she'd gone to the lake without telling him, and when she didn't come back by dark, he called 911. Ruiz investigated. She was thorough. I'll give her that. But the lake had a history. 1 or 2 drownings every few years. Boaters who overestimated their skill or underestimated the current. The physical evidence matched. The boat was capsized. The jacket was floating. The story held together. But matching isn't the same as proving. 4 months later, after the statutory waiting period for a missing person presumed dead, Derek filed a life insurance claim. $200,000. It processed without challenge. $200,000 in insurance money. And within a year, he needed my pension. The math didn't work. But I wasn't ready to do the math. Not then. I didn't question any of it. I was too busy watching my wife die. Janet lasted 6 months after Rachel's funeral. I buried her on a Saturday. It rained. The funeral without a body, without a casket, just a photograph on an easel and a room full of people who didn't know what to say. Janet stood at the front and spoke about Rachel's garden, about the way she'd call every Thursday evening to ask about a recipe, about the crooked smile and the birthmark and the daughter she'd chosen, even if biology hadn't provided one. After that, Janet stopped. Not all at once. Not the way a light goes out when you flip a switch. More like a slow brownout. The Sunday pot roasts disappeared. I'd find her standing in the kitchen holding a wooden spoon, staring at the stove like she'd forgotten what it was for. She stopped sleeping. I'd wake at 2 in the morning and find the bed empty, and she'd be sitting in the living room in the dark, holding one of Rachel's gardening gloves. She lost 20 pounds in 3 months. It's grief, Dr. Paxton said at her checkup. Give it time. I knew better. I'd seen grief. I'd held the hands of people who lost everything in a fire, stood with them while they watched their houses burn to ash. Grief didn't look like this. This was something heavier, something that pressed down on her chest until her heart couldn't take the weight. The stroke came on a Wednesday morning in September. I was in the garage organizing tools. I heard a thump from the kitchen. Found her on the linoleum, one arm stretched toward the phone. The ambulance took 11 minutes. She was breathing when they loaded her in, but her eyes were somewhere else. 4 days later, the monitors flatlined at Collinsville General. I was holding her hand. Derek was in the hallway on his phone. I sold the Cape Cod 3 months after the funeral. Couldn't walk through those rooms anymore. Couldn't smell the ghost of pot roast in the kitchen, or see the empty spot where Janet's chair used to face the window. I bought a 2-bedroom cabin 20 minutes outside town, at the end of a gravel road, where the nearest neighbor was a quarter mile through the trees. The cabin smelled like pine sap and old plywood. That was the selling point. I converted the garage into a workshop for my fire extinguisher collection. Brass and copper models I'd been gathering from estate sales for 20 years. Each one catalogued in a leather-bound journal. Manufacturer, date, where I found it, condition before and after restoration. The work was slow and careful. Disassembly, polishing, rebuilding. The same patience I'd used reading fire scenes, applied to something that couldn't hurt me. I wore Janet's wedding band on a chain beneath my shirt. Then Derek came to me about Tyler. He showed up at the cabin one Sunday afternoon, 3 months after Janet's funeral. Tyler was nearly 7, sitting in the back seat of Derek's leased BMW, with his nose pressed against the window. Derek had circles under his eyes and a crease between his brows that I'd never seen before. He sat at my kitchen table and laid it out. "I'm struggling, Dad." He talked about childcare costs, school expenses, the mortgage on a house he'd bought after the insurance money came through, a 4-bedroom colonial in a newer subdivision, the kind of place that looked good from the street but carried a payment he couldn't cover on his income, which was sporadic at best. Freelance sales work, he called it, whatever that meant. "I'm not asking for a handout, Dad. I'm asking you to help your grandson." Tyler, my grandson, 9 years old now, brown hair, serious eyes, a quiet kid who flinched at raised voices and drew the same picture over and over. A small cabin surrounded by trees. I didn't know what that picture meant. Not then. I agreed to $25,000 a year. Bank transfer. First of every quarter. The money came from my pension, from the Cape Cod sale proceeds, from 33 years of double shifts and overtime. I'd worked so Derek could play quarterback without worrying about equipment fees. Now I was working so Tyler could have a roof. "Thanks, Dad," Derek said. He didn't hug me. He checked his phone and walked to the car. That was the beginning of the arrangement. $25,000 a year. $75,000 over 3 years. I picked up side work to cover the gap. Small electrical jobs for neighbors, rewiring projects for older houses in the county. At 65, my knees ached on ladders and my lower back seized after long days bent over junction boxes, but the work paid and Tyler needed it. Or so I told myself. Every other weekend, I drove to Derek's house to see Tyler. The 4-bedroom colonial sat on a cul-de-sac, with a 2-car garage and a lawn service that came Tuesdays. Inside, the furniture was new. Leather sectional. A 75-inch television mounted above a gas fireplace that had never been lit. The kitchen had a $400 espresso machine and granite countertops. Tyler's bedroom was the smallest room in the house. His clothes came from Goodwill. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Derek had converted the largest spare bedroom into a home office. Desk, microphone, headphones, a soundproofing panel on one wall. He listened to true crime podcasts the way some men watch football. Hours of it. He'd reference cases at dinner, grading the criminals on their mistakes. The husband always gets caught because of the timeline, he told me once, leaning back in his chair with a beer. You keep it simple, keep it sad, and let people fill in the blanks. That's how you get away with it. I set down my fork. Get away with what? He laughed. Murder, Dad. On the podcast. Keep up. The visits with Tyler were short. 2 hours. Sometimes 3. Derek hovered. Made excuses about schedules, activities, bedtimes. When I offered to pick Tyler up from school more often, Derek called it hovering. He needs stability, Dad. Not you showing up every other day. When I asked about Tyler's declining grades, Derek said the boy was grieving. When I mentioned that the Lake Marion drowning still didn't sit right with me, no body, no witnesses, the boat capsizing on the calmest day of summer, Derek's voice dropped to a flat, cold register I'd never heard from him before. Let it go, Dad. She's gone. Then he started suggesting I was losing my mind. You seem confused lately, he said one Sunday. Repeating things, forgetting stuff. Maybe we should talk to Dr. Myers. I wasn't confused. I wasn't forgetting. But when your own son looks you in the eye and says your memory is failing, part of you listens. Part of you lies awake at night and wonders. Maybe he's right. Maybe grief scrambled something inside me. Maybe I'm seeing patterns that aren't there. That's what he was counting on. I settled into the rhythm of a man who'd accepted his reduced life. Pension, cabin, fire extinguishers in the evening, their brass casings warm under the shop light. Bi-weekly visits with Tyler, who held his pencil wrong and drew cabins in the woods. Janet's ring against my chest. Coffee in the morning, silence at night. I told myself this was enough. Told myself Derek was doing his best as a single father. The investigator's instinct that had solved dozens of arson cases over 3 decades, I called that grief playing tricks on an old man's mind. 6 weeks before Marcus called, I found a drawing crumpled in Derek's kitchen trash can. Tyler had drawn it at school. Crayon on white paper. A small cabin surrounded by pine trees. A flower garden on the front porch. A bird on the railing. Across the top, in a 9-year-old's careful letters, Mommy's house in the woods. Derek saw me holding it. Kid's imagination, he said. He took it from my hand and dropped it back in the trash. You want more coffee? That night, after Derek fell asleep on the couch with a podcast playing through his earbuds, I pulled the drawing from the trash, smoothed it flat, and folded it into my coat pocket. Back at my cabin, I pinned it to the kitchen wall next to a photograph of Janet and Rachel in the garden, both of them laughing, both of them gone. I sat at the table with my coffee and stared at Tyler's drawing for an hour. The cabin, the flowers, the porch railing, the bird. Tyler had been somewhere. He'd seen something. And he'd drawn it the way children draw real places, not from imagination, but from memory. I didn't act. Not yet. That's not how I work. 33 years of reading fire scenes taught me one thing above all else. Patience isn't passive. You're not just waiting. You're watching. You're cataloging. You're building the picture before you name what you see. So I cataloged. I noted the inconsistencies. Derek's monthly schedule had a gap, 1 weekend a month where he and Tyler were unreachable by phone. His spending didn't match any visible income. Tyler's drawings weren't fantasies. They were too detailed, too consistent. The cabin had a flower garden. Rachel loved flowers. Janet had taught her. I kept my mouth shut. I kept my eyes open. I pinned Tyler's drawing next to Rachel's photograph and waited for the picture to finish forming. 6 weeks later, my nephew Marcus called. Looking back, the damage didn't start with cruelty. It started with small refusals. The first Sunday I drove to Derek's Colonial. After we settled the financial arrangement, Tyler ran to the front door when he heard my truck. He pressed his face against the storm glass, breath fogging a circle around his nose. I could see him from the driveway, bouncing on his toes. Derek opened the door before I reached the porch. "Hey, Dad, listen, today's not great." He stood in the doorway, one hand on the frame, filling the gap with his body. Behind him, Tyler's sneakers squeaked on the hardwood as the boy tried to peer around his father's hip. "I drove 40 minutes, I said. I know. It's just, Tyler's got a thing at 3. Birthday party, I promised." Tyler's face appeared between Derek's arm and the doorframe. "Grandpa, I don't have a party." Derek's hand dropped to Tyler's shoulder. A gentle touch, but the boy went still. "Buddy, remember? Jaden's party. We talked about it." Tyler looked at his father, then at me, then at the floor. "Oh, yeah." I stood on that porch for a moment, my keys warm in my hand. Tyler's eyes had gone flat. The look a child gets when they learn the new rules. "Next weekend then," I said. "Absolutely, next weekend." For sure. Next weekend became the weekend after. The weekend after became a phone call at 7 in the morning, canceling because Tyler had a stomach bug. The stomach bug became a school project. The school project became a soccer tournament I hadn't heard about. Each excuse arrived with the same casual shrug. And each time, Tyler's voice got a little quieter in the background. I should have pushed harder. I know that now. But Derek had one weapon I couldn't fight: Tyler's comfort. Every time I pressed for a visit, Derek would pause, lower his voice, and say something about stability, about routine, about what the child psychologist recommended. "He's been through a lot, Dad. Dr. Ames says consistency is what he needs right now. Not more disruption." I never met Dr. Ames. Never got a last name. Never saw a bill. The visits settled into a pattern. Every other weekend, 2 hours, sometimes 3. I'd sit in Derek's living room on the leather sectional that still smelled like the showroom while Tyler showed me his drawings, or we built a model together at the kitchen table. Derek would drift through the room at intervals, checking his phone, listening to something through one earbud, making sure I didn't stay too long. The house told a story Derek didn't want me to read. I read it anyway. Tyler's bedroom was the smallest in a 4-bedroom house. A single bed, a pressboard dresser, a lamp with a crooked shade. His clothes hung in a closet that held maybe 15 hangers. Shirts from Goodwill with their tags still carrying the handwritten prices. Jeans with hems let down twice. Sneakers with the rubber separating at the toe. Down the hall, Derek's bedroom had a king-size bed with a quilted headcover, a mounted television, blackout curtains. The master closet held Vineyard Vines polos in 6 colors, jeans that still had store creases, white sneakers that cost more than Tyler's entire wardrobe. I noticed. I didn't say anything. Not then. During one visit in the spring, I took Tyler to the bathroom to wash up before lunch. Before lunch, the hallway passed Derek's home office, and the door was open. A desk with a dual monitor setup, a podcast microphone on a boom arm, acoustic foam on one wall. Derek hadn't mentioned any podcast of his own. I asked about it at lunch. "Oh, that's just for listening," he said. "Better sound quality. You wouldn't understand the tech stuff, Dad." He smiled, the same boyish smile that had gotten him out of trouble since he was 12. I'd seen that smile aimed at teachers, coaches, traffic cops, his mother. It worked on all of them. It had worked on me too, for a long time. "What are you listening to that needs a studio setup?" I asked. Derek's smile stayed in place, but his eyes shifted. He touched his left earlobe, the way he always did when he was thinking about what to say versus what was true. "True crime stuff. You know me. Murderinos, or whatever they call it. Thought that was a phone and earbuds kind of hobby. Dad, he laughed, but the warmth had left it. Can we not make everything into an interrogation? You're retired, remember? Tyler's spoon clinked against his bowl. He was watching us, the way children watch adults, when the air pressure in the room changes. More soup, buddy? Derek said, and just like that, the conversation was over. That wasn't the last time he used the word retired, like a door he could close between us. In July, I brought Tyler a model fire truck kit, one of the snap-together types with working doors and a real ladder mechanism. We sat at the kitchen table separating parts from the plastic frames, while Derek scrolled his phone on the couch. The parts smelled like fresh plastic, and the afternoon sun came through the window, warm on my hands. Grandpa, can I visit your cabin sometime? Tyler asked. Anytime you want. This weekend? I looked at Derek. He didn't look up from his phone. Ask your dad, I said. Dad? Can I go to Grandpa's cabin this weekend? Oh. Derek's thumb stopped scrolling. We'll see, buddy. We'll see. The answer that means no, without giving you anything to argue against. I could pick him up Friday after school, I said. Bring him back Sunday. Derek set his phone face down on the couch cushion. Dad, can we talk in the kitchen? We stepped into the kitchen, out of Tyler's earshot. Derek leaned against the counter and crossed his arms. You can't just promise him things without checking with me first. I didn't promise, I offered. Same thing to a 9-year-old. He rubbed his jaw. Look, I appreciate you wanting to spend time with him. I do. But Tyler needs structure right now. His therapist says routine is everything. Which therapist? What? You mentioned Dr. Ames before. Now it's a therapist. Which one is it? Derek's expression went flat. Not angry, not defensive, just flat. The way a wall looks when you strip the paint and find bare drywall behind it. His counselor at school. Whatever. The point is, he needs consistency, Dad. Having him bouncing between houses, different routines, different bedtimes. It's not good for him. I raised a child, Derek. I know about bedtimes. You raised me 30 years ago. His voice dropped. Things are different now. Parenting is different. You don't just hand a kid a sandwich and tell him to go play outside. I looked at him for a long moment. My son, standing in a kitchen he paid for with a dead woman's insurance money, wearing a polo shirt that cost more than his boys' school shoes, lecturing me about parenting. Tyler's welcome at my cabin anytime, I said. You know the address. I went back to the table and finished the model truck with my grandson. When we were done, Tyler held it up to the light, turning it so the ladder caught the sun through the window. It's a good one, Grandpa. You did the hard part. Can we build another one next time? You bet. Derek drove them away an hour later. Tyler waved from the back seat. The model truck sat on the passenger side, propped against the window so it wouldn't fall. I watched the car until it turned the corner, then went inside and washed the dishes. The next time I visited, the model truck wasn't in Tyler's room. I looked on his dresser, his windowsill, the floor of his closet. Gone. I didn't ask. I already knew. The financial picture didn't add up, and that bothered me the way a pour pattern on a clean concrete floor bothers an investigator. You can see the shape, but you haven't named the accelerant yet. I sent $25,000 a year. Derek's freelance sales work, whatever it was, produced income he never specified. The insurance payout had been $200,000. Even spending at his pace, that money should have lasted 3 years, maybe 4. But by the second year of my payments, he was already talking about cash flow problems. During a visit that October, I stopped at Derek's kitchen to get Tyler a glass of water and saw a stack of envelopes on the counter. School lunch debt notice, past due on Tyler's after-school program, a late fee from the orthodontist. Derek walked in and swept the envelopes into a drawer before I could read the amounts. Junk mail. he said. I poured the water and didn't answer. Where was the money going? Not to Tyler, not to the house, which was mortgaged, not to savings. I thought about the sports betting apps I'd glimpsed on his phone screen when he set it face down on the couch. $25,000 a year from me, $200,000 from Rachel's life insurance. 3 years of whatever freelance work he claimed. The numbers should have worked. They didn't. But I didn't push. Pushing meant questions. Questions meant confrontation. Confrontation meant losing access to Tyler. Derek had taught me that equation without ever stating it out loud. Then came the conversation that changed everything. Thanksgiving weekend, 9 months before Marcus's call. I drove to Derek's house with a pumpkin pie Janet used to make. Same recipe, same glass dish, same foil crimped around the edges. My knees ached from the drive, and my lower back had seized twice during the morning. But Tyler helped me carry it inside, holding the dish with both hands, tongue poking out in concentration. We ate early. Turkey from a deli counter, mashed potatoes from a box, green beans from a can. Janet's pot roast took 6 hours. She used fresh carrots from the garden. Tyler didn't notice. He was 9. He ate what was in front of him and asked for seconds. After dinner, Tyler went to his room to draw. I could hear the scratch of crayons through the thin walls. Derek poured himself a bourbon and leaned back in his chair. I've been thinking about something, Dad. What's that? Real estate. He swirled the glass. There's a guy I know who's flipping houses in Myrtle Beach. 3 properties last quarter. The returns are insane. What kind of returns? 30, 40%. On a $100,000 investment, you're looking at $140 back in 6 months. I set my fork down. You need $100,000. I need capital to get started. Once the first flip closes, the money rolls. Where would $100,000 come from? Derek met my eyes. He had that look, the one I'd seen in every bad interview I'd conducted as an investigator. The look of a man who'd rehearsed his next line. Mom's trust. Janet had set up a trust for Tyler before she died. Education money. Protected money. The kitchen went quiet. Down the hall, Tyler's crayons scratched on paper. The refrigerator hummed. That trust has conditions, I said. I know, but you're the trustee. You can make adjustments. Janet set those conditions. Janet's gone, Dad. He said it the way you'd mention a change in the weather. The trust should work for the family that's still here. I looked at my son across that table, across the remains of a Thanksgiving dinner his mother would have been ashamed to serve, and I saw the shape of what he was. Not all at once, not the full picture, but the outline, the way you see the outline of a pour pattern before you identify the accelerant. The trust stays as it is, I said. Dad, just listen for a second. No, one word. I didn't raise my voice, didn't explain, didn't justify. Derek's smile disappeared. The boyish charm drained from his face like water through a cracked pipe, and what was left underneath was something I'd never seen from him before. Cold. The kind of look I'd seen from men deciding whether to fight or find another way around. Fine, he said. He finished his bourbon in one swallow. Forget I mentioned it. I didn't forget. 3 weeks later, a letter arrived from an elder care attorney in the next county. Someone had made a preliminary inquiry about the process for challenging a trust based on the trustee's diminished mental capacity. Diminished mental capacity. That was the phrase. My own son, building a case that I was losing my mind. The letter was addressed to me, forwarded by my own attorney as a courtesy. No name was attached to the inquiry. Didn't need one. That's when the gaslighting got worse. Every visit, every phone call, Derek would slip in a comment. You already told me that story, Dad. You said Tuesday, not Thursday. Are you sleeping okay? You seem off. The comments were small, surgical. designed to build a pattern, a paper trail of decline that would support a competency challenge if he needed one. I let him think it was working. I stopped correcting him when he said I'd forgotten something, nodded when he asked if I'd taken my pills, let my hands shake when he was watching. But I was cataloging every comment, every deflection, every lie that didn't match the last one. I wrote them in my leather-bound journal, the same book where I logged fire extinguisher restorations. Back pages, where Derek would never think to look. I didn't have a name for what my son was doing. Not yet. I just knew the signature didn't match the story he was telling. Tyler's drawings kept appearing. Cabins in the woods, flower gardens, a bird on a porch railing, each one more specific than the last. Each one thrown away by Derek when he found it. During my second-to-last visit before Marcus called, I arrived early. Derek wasn't expecting me for another hour. Tyler was at the kitchen table drawing, and he didn't hear me come in through the side door. I looked over his shoulder. This drawing was different from the others, more careful. He'd used colored pencils instead of crayons, and the detail was precise for a 9-year-old. The cabin had a green door. The flower garden had red and yellow blooms. The bird on the railing was red with a bent tail. And in the doorway of the cabin, a stick figure with short brown hair stood with arms open. Tyler sensed me behind him and covered the drawing with his hands. "It's just pretend, Grandpa." "That's a nice cabin," I said. He looked up at me, and for a moment something crossed his face. Not fear, the look of a boy holding a secret that hurt to carry. "It's real," he whispered, "but Dad says I can't tell." I heard the front door open. Derek's keys hit the ceramic dish on the entry table. Tyler's hands moved fast. He folded the drawing and shoved it into his backpack. By the time Derek walked into the kitchen, Tyler was coloring in a blank sheet, pressing hard enough to snap the pencil tip. "Dad, you're early." Traffic was light. Derek's eyes went to the table, to the colored pencils, to Tyler's hunched shoulders. His hand came up to his left earlobe. "Tyler, go wash up." The boy left without a word. His backpack went with him. Derek watched him go, then turned to me with that easy grin he'd worn since childhood. "Kids and their drawings. His school counselor says it's healthy expression." I poured myself a cup of coffee from the pot on the counter. Took a sip. Set the mug down. "Good counselor," I said. 6 weeks later, Marcus called about Cabin 7, and the picture I'd been building for 3 years, the one assembled from rejected visits and suspicious numbers and a child's hidden drawings, finished forming. Every detail clicked into place, the way char patterns click when you finally identify where the fire started. My son hadn't just lied about Rachel's death. He built an entire architecture of deception, and I'd been funding it. I just didn't have the proof yet. Not until Marcus called about Cabin 7. My hands went still over the brass extinguisher I'd been restoring for weeks. I set it down on the workbench and pressed the phone harder against my ear. "Say that again, Marcus." "Uncle Hank, I know this sounds crazy, but I think I just saw Rachel." The shop light buzzed above me. A moth tapped against the bulb. Outside, the pines creaked in a wind I couldn't feel through the garage walls. "Where?" "Cabin 7? Pine Ridge Resort, that old fishing place off Route 9. End of the dirt access road." I was heading to my spot on the reservoir and drove right past. She was on the porch, tending flowers. Flowers. Janet taught her that. "Describe what you saw." Marcus paused. When he spoke again, his voice had the careful cadence of a man who understood he was delivering something that couldn't be taken back. Thin, pale, hair cut short, shorter than she used to wear it. She was kneeling by a planter box, turning soil with her bare hands. When my truck passed, she looked up. That's when I saw the birthmark. The crescent shape below her left ear. The one she used to cover with her hair, until Janet told her it was pretty. "And the smile," Marcus said. That crooked thing she does when you catch her off guard. She did it for half a second before she looked away. I set my palm flat on the workbench. The wood was warm from the shop light. The brass extinguisher gleamed in my peripheral vision, all its parts exposed, every mechanism visible. Marcus, listen to me carefully. I'm listening. Do not approach. Do not wave. You drive past that cabin like you're heading to your fishing spot. You park where she can't see the truck, and you call me back in 5 minutes. Can you do that? Already done. I'm parked behind the tree line at the reservoir lot. She can't see me from here. Good man. Stay there. Don't go back. Uncle Hank, is she really? I don't know yet, but I'm going to find out. I hung up and sat in the silence of my workshop. The moth had given up on the light and landed on the edge of my leather-bound catalog, the one where I logged every extinguisher restoration. Manufacturer, date, provenance, condition before, condition after. I didn't move for a full minute. I counted the seconds the way I used to count them before entering a structure. 1 Mississippi, 2, 3. 60 seconds of nothing but my own breathing and the refrigerator humming through the wall. Then, something shifted inside me, the way it shifts when you finally identify the point of origin in a fire scene. Everything I'd been looking at without seeing clicked into place. And I knew. My son staged Rachel's death. My son collected $200,000 in insurance money. My son let Janet die, believing her daughter-in-law drowned in Lake Marion on the calmest day of summer. Every Sunday dinner. Every "let it go, Dad." Every suggestion that I was losing my mind. All of it was performance. Stage management. Smoke and mirrors from a man who listened to true crime podcasts and graded criminals on their mistakes. I pulled Janet's wedding band from beneath my shirt and held it in my palm. The gold was warm from my skin. The inscription inside read, J.P. Plu Och.B. 1983, in letters so small you needed a magnifying glass. My palm was scarred from 33 years of firework. Burns, cuts, a deep line across the base of my thumb from a broken window on Prospect Avenue in 1997. Janet had bandaged that one herself, sitting at the kitchen table with her first aid kit and her reading glasses, telling me I was too old to be punching through glass. I allowed myself 60 seconds. For Janet, who died believing the lie. For Rachel, hidden in a cabin for 3 years with flowers and silence. For Tyler, carrying a secret that bent his spine every time he sat down to draw. For the $75,000 I'd sent to a man who'd used it to keep every piece of his lie standing. 60 seconds. Then I set the ring back against my chest and stood up. My fire investigation evidence kit sat on the top shelf of the workshop, behind a row of restored extinguishers. Hard-sided case, black, with a combination lock I hadn't opened since retirement. Inside, camera, evidence bags, nitrile gloves, and the grid paper notebook I'd carried into 100 collapsed structures. I'd used this kit to document pore patterns, photograph accelerant residue, and catalog the physical signatures of arson. I hadn't opened it in 3 years. The combination was Janet's birthday. Month, day, year. The latches clicked. The hinges were stiff, but clean. I'd oiled them before storing the kit, the same way I maintained everything. The camera battery was dead, but the charger was in the drawer. I plugged it in. The notebook pages were blank, waiting. I set the kit on the workbench next to the 1923 Purine and looked at them both. One thing I'd restored. One thing I was about to use for the investigation that mattered more than any fire I'd ever read. I charged the camera overnight. 40 miles east on empty roads, the sun still low through the windshield. I drove to Pine Ridge Resort at first light. The resort sat on a county road that hadn't been repaved since the Clinton administration. Pine Ridge had been a fishing destination in the 70s and 80s, 12 cabins spread along a ridge above a reservoir. Most of them were empty now, windows boarded, porches sagging. The main office was a double-wide trailer with a hand-painted sign that read, "Office. Open maybe," in faded red letters. I parked a quarter-mile from cabin 7 in a gravel pullout screened by a stand of white pines. The evidence kit sat on the passenger seat. I left it there and walked. The access road was dirt, packed hard from years of use, but soft at the shoulders where rain had washed channels through the red clay. I photographed the tire tracks in the soft shoulder first. 2 distinct tread patterns. One narrow, the kind you'd see on a sedan or a small SUV. The other, wider and deeper. A truck. Marcus's from yesterday. The narrower tracks were older, the edges eroded, but they appeared in multiple layers. Someone drove this road on a regular basis. I walked the road for 6 minutes before the cabin came into view. Cabin 7 sat at the end of a short gravel spur, backed against a hillside thick with loblolly pines. Single story. Green door. Weathered cedar siding that had gone silver with age. A covered porch ran the width of the front, and along the porch railing sat a row of planter boxes filled with flowers. Red geraniums, yellow marigolds, light petunias, the same varieties Janet had grown in our garden on Elm Street. Rachel's garden, the one Janet taught her to plant. A cardinal sat on the porch railing. Small, bright red, with a bent tail feather that angled left instead of straight back. It cocked its head at me and didn't move. The same bird Tyler had drawn, or one like it. Either way, the boy had drawn what he'd seen. I stood at the tree line, 50 yards from the cabin, and used the camera's zoom to document everything. The cabin's condition, the flower boxes, the green door, closed, a pair of work gloves draped over the railing, a water can beside the steps, a curtain in the front window, white, pulled shut, no car in the gravel spur, no signs of activity. I did not approach. Evidence gathered wrong is evidence thrown out. I'd learned that in courtrooms, not classrooms. Photograph from a distance. Document the exterior. Note the conditions. Do not enter. Do not touch. I spent 20 minutes at the tree line. Photographed the cabin from 4 angles. Photographed the tire tracks on the access road. Noted the distance from the main road, the lack of other occupied cabins within sight, the density of the pine cover. A person could live here for years without being noticed by anyone who wasn't looking. Then I walked back to my truck, drove home, and pinned the photographs next to Tyler's drawing on the kitchen wall. The cabin in the drawing matched the cabin in the photographs. The porch railing, the flowers, the surrounding pines. Tyler had drawn this place from memory. He'd been there. Derek had brought him there. I opened my leather-bound catalog to a fresh page, past the fire extinguisher entries, past the notes I'd been keeping in the back pages about Derek's lies and inconsistencies. I wrote the date, the location, 3 words. Rachel is alive. Then I picked up the phone and called the one person I trusted to help me prove it. Gail Patterson answered on the second ring. She'd worked out of Station 3 for 12 years before transitioning into private investigation after retirement. 58 years old, sharp, direct, incapable of small talk. I'd saved her career during an internal review in 2009 when the department tried to pin a paperwork error on her that belonged to a shift commander. She told me afterward she'd repay the favor. I'd told her to forget it. She hadn't. Hank, it's 7 in the morning. I need your help, Gail. A pause. The sound of coffee being poured. What kind of help? The kind that requires your pie license and your filing cabinets. Tell me. I told her everything. Tyler's drawings. The financial gap. Derek's gaslighting. Marcus's phone call. The photographs I'd taken that morning. Rachel's flowers on the porch of a cabin 40 miles from the house where her son slept in the smallest room. Gail didn't interrupt. When I finished, the line was quiet for 5 seconds. "Come to my office," she said. "Bring everything." Her office occupied the second floor above Henderson's Hardware in downtown Collinsville. One room, filing cabinets along every wall, a whiteboard covered in notes from other cases. The kind of place Derek would never think to look for his father. I climbed the narrow stairs with the evidence kit in one hand and Tyler's crayon drawing in the other, the one I'd pulled from Derek's trash 6 weeks ago. Gail met me at the door. She had coffee waiting. She'd cleared the whiteboard. I spread the photographs across her desk and pinned the drawing next to them. "Tell me what you need," she said. "Everything. The cabin rental records, the insurance claim, his bank statements, his phone records. I need to build a case file that a prosecutor can't ignore. That's a 3-week job. Minimum. Then we start now." Gail pulled a legal pad from her desk drawer and uncapped a pen. "Cabin first. If Rachel's alive and living there, someone's paying for it. Rental agreements leave trails." Over the next 3 weeks, Gail and I built the evidence chain. She traced the Cabin 7 rental through Pine Ridge Resort's business filings and public property records. 3 years of continuous occupancy, paid in cash, under a name that didn't match anyone in the county records. The name was fake, but the handwriting on the originating rental application wasn't. Gail obtained a copy through a public records request filed with the county assessor's office, which held duplicate filings for all commercial leases in the district. The looping R, the careful L's. I'd seen that handwriting on birthday cards and grocery lists for a decade. It was Rachel's. Derek must have assumed no one would ever pull paper files from a backwoods resort. He'd underestimated how far an investigator would dig. Alongside the rental agreement, Gail found a utility bill in the same handwriting, recent, current. The financial records came next. Gail had access to public record databases and skip tracing tools that I couldn't touch on my own. She pulled what she could from court filings, property records, and credit bureau data, then laid Derek's spending pattern out on the whiteboard in colored markers. The $200,000 insurance payout, gone within 2 years. A mortgage on the Colonial that ate $3,000 a month. Car lease payments. Credit card bills at restaurants I'd never heard of. Recurring charges to 3 separate sports betting platforms. And my $25,000 a year, arriving on schedule every quarter, filling the gap between what Derek spent and what Derek earned. He's spending $48,000 a year more than his freelance income covers, Gail said, tapping the whiteboard. Your money accounts for every dollar of the shortfall. She also mapped Derek's patterns through publicly available check-in data and location, tagged social media posts. His phone placed him near Pine Ridge Resort once a month. Same pattern every time. Saturday morning departure, Saturday evening return. Visits he never mentioned to me. Never mentioned to anyone. Gail flagged these findings as preliminary leads for law enforcement to verify through proper subpoena. Not courtroom evidence. Breadcrumbs. I drove back to Cabin 7 3 more times during those 3 weeks. Always on days when the pattern data showed Derek should be in Collinsville. I parked at the pullout. I walked the access road. I photographed the tire tracks in the soft shoulder, the same narrow tread pattern appearing in fresh layers each time. I matched the tread width to the standard tire size for a BMW 3 Series, Derek's lease. I photographed the cabin's exterior from every angle, using reference objects for scale the way I'd been trained. I noted the water can, refilled and repositioned each visit. The flower boxes, tended and alive. Someone was living in that cabin. Someone who knew how to grow geraniums and marigolds and petunias the way Janet Braddock had taught only one person. I did not enter. I did not knock. I did not approach the porch. By the end of 3 weeks, the whiteboard in Gail's office looked like a case file from my arson investigation days. Photographs arranged by date and location. Financial flows mapped in red and blue markers. The rental agreement with Rachel's handwriting, photocopied and mounted at center. Gail stood back and looked at it. This is tight, Hank. Clean documentation, where we had access. And clear leads for law enforcement to follow up with subpoena power. Is it enough to get them started? More than enough to reopen the case. She paused. But you need to decide. Do you go to the police, or do you confront him first? I thought about Janet's ring against my chest, about Tyler's hidden drawings, about Rachel behind that green door, tending flowers that connected her to a dead woman who loved her. Police, I said, but I need to talk to someone specific. Who? The detective who closed the Lake Marion case. Gail nodded. Ruiz. I called Detective Alma Ruiz the next morning. She'd handled the original drowning investigation 3 years ago, the one she closed as accidental, based on the physical evidence, and Derek's red-eyed performance in her interview room. She was 44 now, County Detective Division, with a reputation for thorough casework and an even temper. I requested a meeting. She agreed without asking why, which told me something. Detectives who are at peace with their closed cases don't take meetings about them without questions. Detectives who carry doubt do. We met at the county offices on a Wednesday afternoon. Gray carpet, fluorescent lights, a conference room with a table that seated 8. Ruiz sat at one end. I sat at the other. Between us, I laid out the evidence file. Photographs of Cabin 7, dated and annotated. The rental application, with Rachel's handwriting. Financial records showing the insurance payout timeline and spending pattern. The pattern data showing Derek's monthly trips toward Pine Ridge Resort, flagged as leads requiring subpoena verification. Tyler's crayon drawing of Mommy's house in the woods, the one I'd recovered from Derek's kitchen trash. My own grid paper notes documenting 3 years of inconsistencies, behavioral observations, and Derek's systematic attempts to discredit my memory. I laid it out the way I'd present arson findings. Chronological, cross-referenced, no speculation. Ruiz listened without interrupting. She read each document, examined each photograph, cross-referenced the pattern data against her own case file, which she'd brought to the meeting in a manila folder that looked well thumbed. When I finished, the room was quiet. The fluorescent light hummed. Ruiz set down the last photograph and placed her hands flat on the table. I closed that case, she said. I accepted his story. I looked at her across the table, the file between us. The evidence I'd spent 3 weeks gathering, spread across gray laminate. So did I said. Ruiz was quiet for a long moment. Her fingers pressed against the table. Then she opened a drawer, pulled out a blank case folder, and wrote the date on the tab. I'm reopening this, she said. And I'm going to need your cooperation through the entire process. This goes by the book. Warrants, subpoenas, everything documented. That's how I built this file. I can see that. She looked at me. Captain Braddock, I have one question. Ask it. Why didn't you go to the cabin and knock on the door? Because evidence gathered wrong is evidence thrown out. I've testified in enough courtrooms to know the difference between finding the truth and proving it. Ruiz nodded once. She placed the file in the new folder and closed it. I'll need 10 days, she said. Subpoenas for phone records and bank statements, coordination with the insurance company's fraud unit, a warrant to enter Cabin 7. When I'm ready, I'll call you. One thing, I said. What's that? When you go to the cabin. When you make contact with Rachel. I want to be there. Ruiz studied me for a moment. Why? She knows me. She called me Pop. If a stranger shows up with a badge, she'll be afraid. If I'm there, she'll know it's safe. The detective considered this. I'll allow it. But you stay at the access road until I clear the seam. My team makes first contact. Understood. I stood, picked up my evidence kit, and walked to the door. Behind me, Ruiz was already reaching for her phone. At the doorway, I stopped and turned back. "Detective." She looked up. "Thank you for reopening this." Ruiz held my gaze. "Thank you for building a case I couldn't ignore." I drove home through the late afternoon light, the evidence kit on the passenger seat, the hard-sided case warm from the sun coming through the windshield. On the kitchen wall, Tyler's drawing waited beside the photographs of Cabin 7. The cabin in the crayon matched the cabin in the camera. The flowers matched the flowers. The bird on the railing matched the cardinal with the bent tail feather. I sat at the table and opened my leather-bound catalog. Past the extinguisher entries, past the back page notes about Derek's lies, to the fresh page I'd written on 3 weeks ago. "Rachel is alive." Beneath those words, I added a line. "Debt. Ruiz, reopening. 10-day timeline for warrants." Then I closed the book, set it on the shelf beside the 1923 Purine, and waited for the detective to call. Ruiz needed 10 days. She got 12. I didn't call her. Didn't push. Investigators work at their own pace, and pressing a detective who's building warrant applications only slows the process. I spent those 12 days in the workshop. Finished the 1923 Purine. Started on a 1911 Badgers that I'd picked up at an estate sale in Danville 2 years ago and hadn't touched. The brass casing had a deep green patina and a hairline crack along the seam that needed silver solder. Delicate work. The kind that requires steady hands and a clear head. My hands were steady. My head was anything but. Every evening after putting the tools away, I sat at the kitchen table and looked at the wall. Tyler's drawing, the photographs of Cabin 7, the handwriting comparison Gail had mounted on cardstock, Rachel's looping R from the rental application beside a birthday card she'd sent Janet in 2019. Same person. On the 9th night, I added one more item to the wall. A photograph of Janet and Rachel at the Elm Street house, taken the summer before the drowning. They were kneeling in the garden, both wearing wide-brimmed hats, both laughing at something I'd said from behind the camera. I don't remember what it was. Some joke about tomatoes. Janet's hand was on Rachel's shoulder, and Rachel was holding up a cucumber the size of a baseball bat. Neither of them knew that photograph would end up pinned to a cabin wall as part of a criminal investigation. I looked at Janet's face in that picture every night for 12 nights. I made the same promise each time, the same way I made promises before entering a structure. I'll get this right. On the 12th day, Ruiz called. "Subpoenas came back," she said. "Phone records and bank statements confirm everything in your file. Derek's cell pinged off a tower within 2 miles of Pine Ridge Resort on the first Saturday of every month for the past 36 months. Bank withdrawals match. He's been pulling cash from an ATM in Garrison, 8 miles from the resort, same day as the cell pings. Cash for the cabin rental," I said. "That's my read. The insurance company's fraud unit is cooperating. They want the $200,000 back plus penalties. They've assigned their own forensic accountant to track the payout disbursement. The warrant for Cabin 7? Signed this morning. Judge Harmon reviewed the affidavit and issued it within the hour. We execute tomorrow." I pressed the phone against my ear and looked at the wall. Tyler's cabin. Rachel's flowers. Janet's smile. "I'll be there," I said. Access Road. 6:30 a.m. "You stay at the tree line until I wave you forward, not before." "Understood." "Hank." Ruiz paused. "She's been in that cabin for 3 years. She may not react the way you expect." "I know. People who've been isolated that long, especially under duress, they don't always trust rescue. Even from people they love. I was a fire captain for 33 years, detective. I've pulled people from buildings who fought me the whole way out. They weren't angry at me. They were scared of what came next." Ruiz was quiet for a moment. 6:30. Don't be late. I set the phone down and looked at the clock. 14 hours. In 14 hours, I'd know if the woman in those photographs was the same woman Marcus saw on that porch. In 14 hours, the case I'd built with Gail would meet the warrant Ruiz had signed, and the green door of cabin 7 would open. I didn't sleep, didn't try. I sat in the workshop and polished the Badger's casing until the brass caught the shop light like a mirror. Methodical strokes with a cotton cloth. Left to right, top to bottom. The same discipline I'd apply in the morning. Stay in the process. Trust the evidence. Let the professionals work. At 4:30, I showered, dressed, and drove east in the dark. The access road to Pine Ridge Resort was soft from overnight rain. My truck tires left clean tracks in the red clay as I pulled into the gravel pullout a quarter-mile from cabin 7. Same spot as every other visit. Same white pines screening the view. But this time, 3 unmarked vehicles were already parked along the shoulder. Ruiz's gray sedan, a county forensics van, and a dark blue SUV with government plates that belonged to the insurance company's investigator. Ruiz stood at the edge of the road, coffee in one hand, a manila folder in the other. She wore a navy windbreaker with county detective printed in white block letters across the back. A female officer stood beside her, young, calm, hands clasped at her waist. The forensics team waited at the van, equipment cases stacked on the tailgate. I parked and walked to Ruiz. The air smelled like wet pine and turned earth. "Morning, Captain. Detective." She gestured toward the access road. "Here's how this goes." Officer Denton and I approach the cabin first. We make contact, explain the situation, assess Rachel's state of mind. The forensics team holds at the road until I clear the scene. And me. You hold at the tree line. Same spot you've been photographing from. When Rachel's ready, if she's ready, I wave you forward. What if she's not ready? Then you wait. Ruiz looked at me. This is her moment, Hank. Not yours, not Derek's. Hers. I nodded. My chest was tight, but my breathing was even. I'd walked into worse situations than this. Burning buildings, collapsed floors, rooms where the temperature hit 800 degrees and the air turned to poison. This was a green door and a woman I used to call family. The team moved out at 6:40. Ruiz and Officer Denton walked the access road side by side, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. I followed at distance, then stopped at the tree line, 50 yards from the cabin. Same position, same angle, but this time I didn't raise the camera. The cabin looked the same as my photographs. Green door, closed. Flower boxes along the porch railing. The geraniums had been deadheaded since my last visit, the spent blooms pinched clean. Someone was maintaining them. The cardinal wasn't on the railing. Too early, maybe, or the vehicles had spooked it. Ruiz climbed the porch steps. 3 wooden treads, the middle one bowed from age. She knocked. 3 measured raps. The sound carried through the still morning air, sharp against the silence. No answer. Ruiz knocked again. "Miss Braddock? This is Detective Alma Ruiz, County Detective Division. I'm here with a female officer. You're not in trouble. I need to speak with you." 30 seconds of nothing. Then, from behind the door, a sound. Not words. A sharp intake of breath, the kind you hear from someone who's been holding still for too long. The door opened 4 inches. A chain caught it. Through the gap, I saw a hand, thin, the knuckles red from garden work. Then a face, pale. Brown eyes wide with something beyond fear. The kind of frozen alertness I'd seen in people trapped in structures, the animal recognition that something had changed and the rules they'd built their survival around no longer applied. "Mrs. Braddock, my name is Alma Ruiz. I'm a detective with the county. This is Officer Sarah Denton. May I show you my identification? The door didn't move. The brown eyes shifted from Ruiz to Denton and back. Then a voice, small and rough from under use. Is Tyler okay? Ruiz's posture softened. Not her training, not her procedure. Something more human. Tyler is safe. He's at school right now. He's fine. Does he still hold his pencil wrong? The question hit me from 50 yards away. 3 years in that cabin, and the first thing she asked about was the way her son gripped a pencil. I don't know about his pencil, Ruiz said, but he's healthy, and he's safe. Ms. Braddock, Derek is in custody. He was arrested last night. I hadn't known that. Ruiz hadn't told me. She'd mentioned warrants for the cabin, never said a word about an arrest warrant for Derek. Smart. She'd kept the operations separate so I couldn't accidentally tip him off. The arrest and the cabin visit coordinated to happen within hours of each other. Professional. Clean. Rachel's hand went to her mouth. The chain rattled. He said, if I left, Tyler would go to foster care. He said I'd go to prison. I signed things? I know, Ruiz said. We've seen the documents. You were coerced. You're not under arrest. You're not in trouble. Officer Denton spoke for the first time. Her voice was low and even, the kind of careful you use around something that might break. Ms. Braddock, your father-in-law is here. He'd like to see you, if you're comfortable with that. The chain went taut. Through the 4-inch gap, Rachel's eyes found me at the tree line. 50 yards of dirt road and pine shadow between us. Pop? One word, cracked in half. Ruiz turned and waved me forward. I walked the access road the way I'd walked it every time. Measured steps, even pace. But my hands wouldn't hold still. 3 years I'd carried this. The weight had to go somewhere. I reached the bottom of the porch steps and stopped. Rachel stood in the doorway, the chain still catching the door at 4 inches. She was thinner than the photographs. Her hair, once thick and auburn, was cut to her jaw and dull from lack of care. Her cheekbones stood out sharp. Her hands gripped the door edge, knuckles white, garden dirt still under her nails. The crescent-shaped birthmark below her left ear was visible where her short hair fell away from her neck. She was 34 years old and looked 45. Pop, he told me, I'd lose Tyler. That I'd go to prison for the insurance claim. He made me sign papers. Her voice broke. Derek's in custody, I said. Tyler is safe. Nobody's taking anyone. Her face twisted. Not grief, not relief. Something between the two that doesn't have a name. Her hand came off the door and pressed against the chain. And then the chain rattled off its track, and the green door swung open. And Rachel stood on the porch of a cabin she'd lived in for 3 years because my son told her she'd lose her child if she stepped off it. She was wearing a flannel shirt, 2 sizes too big. Sleeves rolled past her wrists. The shirt had a bleach stain on the collar. Derek brought her clothes in grocery bags. 3 years of second-hand flannel and garden dirt and 1 sentence a day written to a boy who'd never see them. Rachel's mouth pulled sideways. That crooked smile. The one Marcus saw from his truck. The one that came out when she wasn't expecting it. When something broke through the careful stillness she'd built around herself. She came down the steps and grabbed my jacket with both hands, her fists bunching the fabric at my chest. Her forehead pressed against my shoulder, and she shook. Not crying. Shaking. The kind of full-body tremor that comes when you've been holding your bones rigid for so long that letting go feels like falling apart. I put my arms around her. 110 pounds, maybe less. I could feel her ribs through the flannel. My hands rested on her back, and I stood there on the packed dirt at the bottom of the porch stairs and held what was left of the woman my wife had loved like a daughter. Ruiz gave us a full minute before she spoke. Miss Braddock, we have a warrant to enter the cabin and document the interior. Is there anything inside you'd like us to know about before we go in? Rachel pulled back from my chest and wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Her voice found its ground. Not strong, but present. Under the bedroom floorboard, she said. The loose one near the window. There are notebooks. 4 of them. What's in the notebooks? Things I wrote to Tyler. Every day. 1 sentence a day for 3 years. She paused. Today, I planted marigolds. You would have helped me dig. She said it like she was reading from memory. That kind of thing. Every day. Ruiz nodded to the forensics team. They moved toward the cabin with their cases. Rachel watched them go through the green door, her arms wrapped around herself, and I saw her jaw tighten when the first officer stepped across her threshold. There's a folder on the kitchen table, Rachel said. Manila. Derek brought papers for me to sign. He said they were for Tyler's school. I don't know what they were. We'll document everything, Ruiz said. The forensics team worked for 2 hours. Through the doorway, I could hear the click of a camera shutter and the scratch of evidence markers being numbered. I sat with Rachel on the porch steps while they moved through the cabin room by room. Ruiz had brought water. Rachel held the bottle with both hands, but didn't drink for a long time. She kept turning it, the same way she'd turned soil in a planter box. Something to do with her fingers, while the world she'd built in that cabin was dismantled around her. The Cardinal arrived at 7:15. Same bent tail. It landed on the porch railing 3 feet from where Rachel sat and cocked its head. That's him, Rachel said. Every morning. Tyler drew him, I said. Red bird on a porch railing. Colored pencils. Rachel's eyes filled. She didn't blink them away. Derek brought Tyler here once a month. Saturday mornings. An hour, sometimes 2. Tyler would sit on this porch and draw while Derek told me what to sign. Then they'd leave, and I wouldn't see anyone until the next month. How did he keep you here? He said the insurance company would prosecute me. He said I'd signed the claim forms. He showed me copies with my signature. I don't remember signing them, but they looked real. She paused. He said if I surfaced, Tyler would go into the system. Foster care. He said no judge would give custody to a woman who faked her own death. You didn't fake it. I know that. But he said it enough times that I stopped knowing it. Ruiz emerged from the cabin, carrying 2 evidence bags. One held the manila folder. The other held 4 spiral notebooks. Their covers warped from humidity. Pages swollen. Miss Braddock, the notebooks will be entered into evidence, but I want you to know they support your account. The entries document coercive control, Derek's threats, the isolation, the documents signed under duress. My office will be recommending that you be classified as a victim, not a co-conspirator. Rachel looked at the evidence bags. 3 years of daily sentences, sealed in plastic. Can Tyler read them someday? When this is over, Ruiz said, they're yours. The forensics team loaded the last of the evidence cases into the van. Ruiz spoke with her officers at the road. I sat with Rachel on the porch as the morning sun hit the flower boxes and the geraniums glowed red against the weathered cedar. Janet taught me those, Rachel said, looking at the flowers. I know. I kept them alive because it was the only thing I could still do that she showed me. Everything else, the cooking, the canning, the way she organized a kitchen, I lost all of it in here. But the flowers stayed. She turned to me. The crooked smile was gone. In its place was something harder and clearer. Pop, what happens now? Now you come home, I said. Tyler needs his mother. And I need help eating all the food I keep making for one person. Rachel looked at the cabin, at the green door standing open, at the porch railing where the Cardinal still sat, watching us with one black eye. I haven't been outside this property in 3 years, she said. The farthest I've walked is the tree line. Then we'll start with the truck. It's a quarter-mile up the road. We'll take it slow." She stood up. Her legs weren't reliable yet. She gripped the porch railing with one hand, the same railing Tyler had drawn in crayon, and took the first step off the porch. Then the second. Her feet hit the packed dirt of the access road, and she stood there for a moment, looking up at the sky through the pine canopy, breathing air that carried pine and rain and distance. I walked beside her. My own breathing was tight and shallow, the morning pressing against my chest in a way I hadn't expected. Ruiz followed at a distance, giving space. The quarter-mile took 10 minutes. Rachel stopped twice, once to look back at the cabin, once to press her hand against the trunk of a pine tree, like she was checking whether it was real. At the pullout, my truck waited where I'd parked it at 6:15 that morning. Rachel stood at the passenger door and looked at me over the hood. "Pop." "Yeah. Thank you for not giving up." I opened her door. She climbed in and buckled the belt with hands that were still shaking. I walked around to the driver's side, got in, and started the engine. I pulled onto the county road. Rachel didn't look back. Ruiz had kept the operations separate. I learned that the morning I drove Rachel away from Cabin 7, Derek's arrest happened the night before, around 10 p.m. 2 officers from the County Detective Division picked him up at the Colonial on a warrant Ruiz had obtained alongside the Cabin 7 entry warrant. She'd timed it so Derek would be in custody before anyone approached Rachel. Coordinated to the hour. Derek would be locked down before anyone knocked on Rachel's door. No chance for him to make a phone call, send a warning, or drive 40 miles to a cabin in the woods to manage the situation the way he'd been managing it for 3 years. Ruiz told me the details over the phone that afternoon, after Rachel was settled at my cabin. Derek had answered the door in a Vineyard Vines polo and gym shorts, phone in hand, earbud in one ear. True crime podcast playing. He'd looked at the badge and the warrant and touched his left earlobe. "There's been a mistake," he'd said. Same line he'd used his entire life. Same boyish smile. The officers didn't smile back. He was booked on charges of insurance fraud, filing a false missing persons report, and misuse of emergency services. The county prosecutor's office was reviewing additional charges under the state's coercive control statute. Bail hadn't been set yet. He'd spent the night in a holding cell at the county detention center, 4 miles from the Colonial he'd purchased with Rachel's life insurance money. Ruiz gave me 2 days. 2 days to get Rachel situated, to make sure Tyler understood that his mother was alive and coming home, to prepare the cabin for 3 people instead of 1. Then she wanted to meet. There were things to discuss, she said. Legal things. Things that required decisions. I used those 2 days. Gail Patterson handled the first piece. She picked up Tyler from school that morning with the emergency custody paperwork Ruiz had arranged through family court. Tyler walked into my cabin carrying his backpack, the one that held his hidden drawings, and stopped in the hallway. Rachel was standing against the far wall, her arms wrapped around herself, her face tight with 3 years of waiting. "Mom?" Rachel's knees buckled. She caught herself on the wall and slid down until she was kneeling on the hallway floor. Tyler dropped his backpack and ran to her. She caught him and held on with a grip that bent her fingers white against his jacket. I stepped back, sat at the kitchen table, and listened to the sounds coming through the thin walls. Tyler crying, Rachel's voice, broken and raw, saying his name over and over. The boy asking questions she couldn't answer yet. I made coffee, drank it cold. The next morning, I drove to Derek's Colonial while Tyler was at school. Rachel stayed at the cabin. The house was locked, crime scene tape across the front door, but I wasn't there to go inside. I was there to pick up Tyler's things. Ruiz had cleared it with the responding officers. One of them met me at the side entrance and walked me to Tyler's room, the smallest bedroom in a 4-bedroom house. I packed 2 bags. His clothes, most of them second-hand, fit in one duffel with room to spare. The second bag held his school supplies, his colored pencils, a stuffed bear with a missing eye. On his dresser, I found a stack of drawings held together with a rubber band. Cabins, flowers, red birds, the same images over and over, drawn by a boy who couldn't tell anyone what he'd seen. I took those too. Tyler's bedroom had bare walls. No posters, no photographs, no model fire truck. The one I'd built with him 6 months ago was gone. I'd known that already, but standing in that room with its single bed and its crooked lamp, looking at the empty shelf where a 9-year-old boy should have had books and toys and proof that someone cared, I had to set the bags down and press my hands against my knees for a moment. Then I picked them up and walked out. I converted the garage workshop that afternoon, moved the fire extinguisher collection to shelved display cases in the living room. Every brass and copper piece, cataloged and numbered, relocated to the wall above the couch where Janet's photograph hung. The workshop became Tyler's bedroom. I bought a twin bed at the furniture store in town, a desk from the thrift shop, and a lamp that worked. Rachel helped me hang curtains. Blue ones, Tyler's favorite color, she said. She knew things about her son that 3 years of separation hadn't erased. When Tyler came home from school that afternoon, he walked into his new room and didn't speak. He looked at the bed, the desk, the blue curtains. Then he looked at Rachel, who was standing in the hallway behind me. His face crumpled, and he ran to her again, the way he had the day before, and she held him, and they stood like that in the hallway, until the light changed in the windows. I closed the bedroom door behind me to give them the space, sat at the kitchen table, made more coffee I didn't drink. That evening, after Tyler fell asleep in his new room with the blue curtains and the lamp that worked, Rachel sat across from me at the kitchen table. She held a mug of tea in both hands. Her eyes were swollen. Her voice was steady. He's taller than I imagined. Kids do that. He still holds his pencil wrong. Every time. She looked at the wall where Tyler's drawings were pinned. The cabin. The flowers. The bird. Next to them, the photographs I'd taken from the tree line. The same cabin. The same flowers. He drew it all, she said. Everything he saw. And Derek threw them away. Not all of them. Rachel's eyes moved to Janet's photograph. The one from the garden. Both of them laughing under wide-brimmed hats. Hop, is Janet. She stopped. Read the answer in my face. When? 6 months after your funeral. The mug in her hands went still. She stared at the photograph for a long time. She taught me everything, Rachel said. How to garden. How to cook. How to be part of a family. She was the first person who ever made me feel like I belonged somewhere. She felt the same way about you. Derek told me she was fine. He said everyone moved on. He said you were both fine. I looked at Janet's photograph. Her laugh, her hand on Rachel's shoulder. The cucumber, the size of a baseball bat. He lied about everything, Rachel. You know that now. She nodded. Set the mug down. Pressed her palms on the table. I want to see him. That caught me short. Derek, I need him to see me standing up. I need him to know I'm not in that cabin anymore. I considered it. The request made sense in a way I hadn't expected. Rachel had spent 3 years as a ghost. She needed to be real again. And being real meant being seen by the person who'd made her disappear. I'll talk to Ruiz, I said, but I had my own conversation to finish first. Ruiz called the next morning. Derek's arraignment was scheduled for Thursday, bail hearing to follow. She had more to discuss, and not over the phone. Come to the detention center, she said. Wednesday. There's something you should know before the arraignment. What? He's been asking for you. I drove to the county detention center on Wednesday afternoon. Concrete and wire. Fluorescent corridors. The smell of industrial cleaner and recycled air. Ruiz met me in the lobby with a file folder under her arm. He's been cooperative, she said. Answered booking questions. waived his right to a phone call. Hasn't asked for an attorney. He thinks he can talk his way out. Ruiz nodded. That's my read too. The public defender's office assigned him counsel this morning. He refused, said he'd represent himself. Of course he did. We walked through a security checkpoint and down a corridor to a visitation room. Plastic chairs. A table bolted to the floor. A camera in the corner with a red light. The fluorescent light buzzed. The room smelled like floor wax and stale air. You have 30 minutes, Ruiz said. I'll be on the other side of the glass. I sat down. The plastic chair was cold. The door on the opposite wall opened, and they brought my son in. Derek looked smaller. Not physically. He was the same height, the same soft build, the same product-heavy hair that had gone flat without a shower. But the confidence that had carried him through 36 years of shortcuts and smooth talk had folded inward, leaving a man who looked exactly like what he was. Caught. He wore an orange jumpsuit and plastic sandals. His hands were uncuffed, but he held them in front of his body as if they still were. He sat across from me and placed his palms on the table. Dad, I didn't answer right away. I looked at his hands. Smooth. Uncalloused. The hands of a man who'd never rebuilt anything. You asked to see me, I said. I needed to explain. You had 3 years to explain. Derek's jaw worked. He looked at the table, at the camera, at the wall. Everywhere but at me. I know how this looks. It looks like insurance fraud, a false missing persons report, and 3 years of imprisoning your wife in a cabin. She wasn't imprisoned. She could have left any time. You told her Tyler would go to foster care. His eyes shifted. That flicker I'd seen 1,000 times. The calculation. The search for the right angle. I was protecting them, both of them. The debts I had, the people I owed money to. If they found out Rachel was alive. What people, Derek? He paused. Bookmakers. Guys from the bar investment. People you don't mess with. Names. What? Give me names. The bookmakers. The investors. The dangerous people you were hiding from. His mouth opened, closed. His left hand came up to his earlobe. It's complicated, Dad. No, it isn't. You owed money from sports betting and a failed bar. Those debts totaled around $60,000. You collected $200,000 from Rachel's insurance policy. You spent it in 2 years on a house, a car, and more betting. Then you came to me. The color left his face. How do you know? I read fire scenes for 33 years. Poor patterns. Char depth. Accelerant signatures. Every staged fire has a tell. So does every staged drowning. Dad, you're a firefighter. Not a. Don't. The word came out level. Don't finish that sentence. He stopped. Here's what I know, I said. I know about the cabin rental. Cash payments under a fake name, but Rachel's handwriting on the lease. I know about the cell tower data that puts your phone within 2 miles of Pine Ridge Resort on the first Saturday of every month. I know about the ATM withdrawals in Garrison. I know about the insurance payout and where every dollar went. I know about the sports betting accounts. I know about the school lunch debt you let pile up while you wore $80 polos. Derek's hands curled on the table. His left earlobe was turning red from the constant rubbing. And I know what you did to Tyler. You brought him to that cabin once a month and used him as a leash. A 9-year-old boy carrying a secret that broke him in half. Drawing pictures of his mother's prison and hiding them in his backpack because his father threw them away. I never hurt Tyler. You destroyed his world and made him keep quiet about it. That's worse than hitting him. Derek's eyes went glassy. You don't understand what it was like. The pressure. The money. Rachel was drowning in depression before any of this happened. The plan was supposed to be temporary. Whose plan? Mine. Ours. We talked about it together. Rachel says you coerced her. She says you controlled her phone, isolated her from friends, and presented the staged drowning as the only option. She says you told her it would be 6 months. That's not 3 years, Derek. You kept her in that cabin for 3 years. You brought her groceries in bags and clothes from Goodwill. You made her sign documents she didn't understand. And every month, you drove home and sat in your 4-bedroom colonial and listened to true crime podcasts about people who did exactly what you were doing. His jaw locked. The practiced casualness was gone. The boyish smile was gone. What was left was the flat, cold register I'd heard only a few times before. The real person underneath the performance. What do you want, Dad? Dad? You want me to say I'm sorry? Fine, I'm sorry. I don't want you to say anything. I came to tell you something. He waited. I pulled Janet's wedding band from beneath my shirt collar, held it between my thumb and forefinger, where Derek could see it. The gold caught the fluorescent light. The inscription faced him, JP plus HB 1983. Your mother went into the ground, believing that girl drowned. Derek's face changed. The cold mask cracked. His jaw loosened, and his eyes lost focus, the way a man's face changes when the floor drops. She sat in our living room every night for 6 months, holding Rachel's gardening glove and talking to her in the dark. She stopped eating, stopped sleeping, lost 20 pounds. The doctors called it a stroke. I know what killed her. His mouth moved. No sound came out. I let the silence hold. 3 seconds. 5. The fluorescent light buzzed. Somewhere down the corridor, a metal door clanged shut. Here's what you need to know. Janet's trust has conditional inheritance provisions. You're aware of that. What you're not aware of are the forfeiture clauses. Criminal conviction triggers automatic forfeiture. You will never see $1 of your mother's money. Not the trust, not the pension investments, not the house proceeds. All of it is controlled by me, and after me by attorneys whose only instruction is to protect Tyler. You can't. I didn't write the provisions. Janet did. Before the grief took hold, she sat with our estate attorney and drafted conditions she never told you about. She was smarter than both of us. She knew you'd come for the money. She just didn't know how far you'd go. Derek stared at me. The realization moved through his face like fire through a wall cavity. You can see the moment drywall starts to buckle, the paint blistering from the heat behind it. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. I'll fight it. I'll challenge the trust. With what? You refused a public defender. You have no assets that aren't about to be seized as fraud proceeds. The Colonial was purchased with insurance money that wasn't yours. The BMW is being repossessed. Your bank accounts are frozen pending the financial investigation. He looked at me across that table, and I watched 36 years of charm and deflection and practiced casualness drain out of him the way water drains through a cracked foundation. What was left wasn't anger. It was the face of a man who had just realized, for the first time in his life, that talking wasn't going to fix this. Detective Ruiz is building the case, I said. Insurance fraud carries 5 to 10 years. The false report and misuse of emergency services stack on top. The prosecutor's office is reviewing coercive control charges for what you did to Rachel. 3 years of isolation using a child as leverage. I never. You did. Ruiz read me the entries from those notebooks. 4 spiral notebooks, 1 sentence a day for 3 years. Derek came today. He says, if I leave, Tyler goes to foster care. That's a direct quote, Derek, from your wife. Written in a cabin you paid for with cash, so nobody could trace it. His hands went flat on the table. The left earlobe had gone from red to white, I raised you, I said. I taught you to ride a bike in the driveway on Elm Street. I paid for your football equipment, your prom, your college scholarship that you lost and never told us about. I wired that Cape Cod room by room so you'd have a house that felt solid under your feet. And this is what you built with all of it. I stood. The arraignment is tomorrow. You can represent yourself if you want. You'll lose. But that's your choice. That's the only thing you have left. He looked up at me. His eyes searched my face the way they used to when he was 5 and scared of thunderstorms, looking for the person who would fix it. Dad, please. Rachel's at my cabin. Tyler's in the room I built for him. They're safe. That's the only thing that matters now. I walked to the door, knocked once for the guard. Dad, wait. The door opened. Ruiz stood in the corridor, her face neutral, her hands clasped in front of her. I stepped through without looking back. The door closed behind me with the heavy click of a lock engaging. The sound echoed down the corridor, sharp and final. Ruiz walked me to the lobby. Neither of us spoke until we reached the parking lot. He's going to represent himself? She asked. He thinks he's smarter than everyone else. Always has. The judge will assign standby counsel. He won't listen to them. Ruiz stopped at her car. The afternoon sun was warm on the concrete. A normal Wednesday. People walked to their cars in the adjacent lot, carrying groceries, checking phones. Captain Braddock, the arraignment is at 9 tomorrow. You don't need to be there. I'll be there, she nodded, opened her car door, paused. For what it's worth, I've been doing this job for 18 years. The cases that get to me are the ones where someone trusts the wrong person for the right reasons. You trusted your son because he was your son. That's not a failure. I looked at her. Thank you, detective. Thank you for building a case that held together. The drive back took 40 minutes. I didn't turn on the radio. The cabin was warm when I walked in. The air smelled different. Not brass polish, not coffee, not the woody scent of a house occupied by one person for too long. Rachel was in the kitchen. Tyler sat at the table, colored pencils spread in front of him, drawing something new. Not a cabin in the woods. A house with a porch and a garden and 2 figures standing in the doorway, one tall, one small. The door was open. Both figures were holding hands. Rachel looked up from the stove. I hope you don't mind. I found Janet's recipe cards in the drawer. I looked at the pot on the burner. Carrots, red potatoes, the lid fogging with steam, pot roast. I sat down at the table across from Tyler and watched him draw. His pencil grip was wrong. Fingers too high on the shaft. Thumb hooked at a bad angle. Rachel's eyes caught mine over Tyler's head, and her mouth pulled sideways in that crooked smile. I touched Janet's ring through my shirt. The gold was warm. Then I let it go. Smells good. The legal machinery moved faster than Derek expected. Clean evidence does that. I'd seen it in arson cases. The tighter the file, the faster the gears turned. Thursday morning, 9 a.m., courtroom 3 of the Collinsville County Courthouse. I sat in the second row behind the prosecution's table, wearing a clean flannel and my work boots. Rachel stayed at the cabin with Tyler. She wasn't ready for courtrooms. Not yet. The arraignment took 11 minutes. Judge Catherine Harmon, 62, 20 years on the bench, read the charges in a flat tone that stripped them of everything except their weight. Insurance fraud, filing a false missing persons report, misuse of emergency services, and the newest addition, 3 counts of coercive control under the state's domestic violence statute. 1 for each year Rachel spent in that cabin. Derek stood at the defense table in his orange jumpsuit, hands clasped in front of him, chin up. He'd combed his hair with water. Without the product, it hung limp across his forehead. The public defender assigned as standby counsel sat 2 chairs away. a young woman named Rivera, who kept her legal pad open and her pen ready. Derek had refused her representation. He'd told the judge he intended to represent himself. Judge Harmon looked at him over her glasses, the same look Janet used to give me when I said something she found questionable. "Mr. Braddock, you understand that self-representation in a case of this complexity carries significant risk?" "I understand, Your Honor. I'm familiar with legal proceedings." "From podcasts?" A murmur ran through the courtroom. Derek's left hand went to his earlobe. "I'm prepared to defend myself." Harmon made a note. "Standby counsel will remain available." "How do you plead?" "Not guilty, on all counts." The prosecutor, a lean woman named Colleen Marsh, who'd spent 15 years in the county's financial crimes unit, didn't react. She'd expected this. During the bail hearing that followed, Marsh laid out the flight risk assessment with the same clinical precision I'd used presenting arson findings. Derek had no stable employment. His primary asset, the Colonial, was purchased with fraud proceeds and subject to seizure. His bank accounts were frozen. He had demonstrated a pattern of deception spanning 3 years, including the creation of a false identity for rental purposes and the systematic concealment of a living person reported as deceased. "The state requests bail be set at $250,000, Marsh said. "Cash or bond?" Derek turned to scan the courtroom. His eyes found me in the second row. I watched the calculation happen in real time, the flash of hope, the reach for the old leverage. "Dad," he mouthed. I held his gaze, didn't speak, didn't shake my head. Didn't need to. He read the answer in my face the way I'd taught him to read a wiring diagram. Follow the lines to where they terminate. He turned back to the judge. His shoulders had dropped an inch. Harmon set bail at $250,000. Nobody posted it. Derek was led back through the side door. He didn't look at me again. Outside the courthouse, Ruiz found me on the front steps. The November sun sat low and cold. Fallen leaves scraped across the concrete in a light wind. "Marsh is adding to the charges," Ruiz said. "The insurance company's fraud unit completed their forensic audit. The $200,000 payout, plus penalties and interest, puts the civil recovery action at over $300,000. That's separate from the criminal case. He doesn't have $300,000. He doesn't have $300. The Colonial is flagged for asset seizure. The BMW was repossessed Tuesday. His checking account had $1,100 when we froze it." I looked at the courthouse steps. A woman walked past with a stroller. 2 attorneys stood near the parking lot, laughing about something. "What about Rachel's legal status?" The prosecutor's office reviewed the notebook evidence and my classification. They've accepted Rachel as a coerced victim. No charges. Her testimony will be central to the coercive control case. And custody, emergency custody order stands. Tyler stays with you pending the family court review. Rachel's attorney is filing for reunification. Given the circumstances, I'd expect the judge to grant it within 30 days. 30 days. After 3 years of separation, 30 days felt like nothing. And everything. "Detective, there's something else." Ruiz waited. "Rachel wants to see him." "Derek, she wants to face him." Ruiz considered this. "Before or after the trial?" "Before. She says she needs him to see her standing up. I can arrange a supervised visit at the detention center. But Hank, the prosecutor may have concerns about witness contact before trial. Rachel's not going to compare notes. She's going to look at the man who locked her in a cabin for 3 years and let him know it didn't work." Ruiz studied me for a moment. "I'll talk to Marsh." The community found out fast. The story broke in the Collinsville Courier on Friday morning, front page below the fold. Local man charged in staged drowning and insurance fraud scheme. The article named Derek. named Rachel as the victim, named the cabin, the insurance payout, the false report that had triggered a search and rescue operation 3 years ago, costing the county $12,000 in taxpayer resources. By Friday afternoon, the story had been picked up by 3 regional outlets and a true crime blog based in Richmond. The irony was not lost on the commenters. A man who listened to true crime podcasts for entertainment had become one. Frank Gibbs, who'd lived 3 doors down from Derek's cul-de-sac for 6 years, told a local TV crew he'd lent Derek a leaf blower last October and never got it back. "He seemed normal," Frank said into the camera. "You never think it's the guy next door." The other neighbors gave the same interview with different leaf blowers. The interviews played without me. The comments piled up unread. I had other things to do. Tyler needed a life that felt solid. Not the hollow stage set Derek had built in that colonial, with its leather furniture and espresso machine, and the smallest bedroom for the most vulnerable person in the house. Tyler needed structure, built on something real. I enrolled him in the elementary school closest to my cabin, a 15-minute bus ride through pine-lined roads. His old school records transferred without complication. Gail handled the paperwork. The new school's guidance counselor, a woman named Patricia Holt, who'd been doing the job for 20 years, met with me and Rachel the first week. "He's going to need time," Holt said. "He's been carrying a weight no child should carry." "We know," Rachel said. Her voice had found its ground in the days since leaving the cabin. "Not strong, but there." "He'll draw," I said. "He draws when he can't talk about something. Let him draw." Holt nodded. "We can work with that." Tyler started school on a Monday. He wore new shoes Rachel had bought at the department store in town, the first new shoes he'd owned in 2 years. He climbed onto the bus with his backpack, the same one that had held his hidden drawings, and waved from the window. Rachel stood at the end of the gravel road and watched until the bus disappeared around the bend. Then she went inside and didn't come out for an hour. When she did, she was carrying a trowel and a bag of bulbs from the garden center. "It's too late for spring bulbs," she said. "But if I get them in the ground before the first hard frost, they'll come up in April." She knelt at the edge of the cabin's front porch and started digging. The soil was rocky and cold. Her hands reddened in the November air. I watched from the workshop doorway. Rachel pressed a bulb into the hole and covered it with dirt. Janet told me once that tulips needed the cold to know it was time. She planted hers in November too. I went back to the workshop and started the 1911 Badgers. The hairline crack in the brass casing needed silver solder, delicate work that required a steady hand and a hot iron. I heated the solder, applied it to the seam, and watched it flow into the crack like water finding its level. The repair would hold. It was clean. Outside, Rachel planted bulbs in a row along the porch foundation. 10, 15, 20. Each one pressed into the earth and covered, invisible until spring. The insurance company moved with the focused aggression of an organization that had been defrauded out of $200,000. Their forensic accountant, a man named David Chen who wore wire-rimmed glasses and spoke in numbers the way I spoke in voltages, traced every dollar of the payout through Derek's account. The spending pattern he mapped confirmed what Gail and I had found, but with the precision that comes from subpoena power and full account access. Chen's report, submitted to the court as part of the civil recovery action, read like an autopsy of Derek's finances. The $200,000 paid out in February, 3 years ago. First withdrawal, $42,000 for the down payment on the Colonial. Second, $18,000 for furniture, appliances, and a home theater system. Third, recurring monthly payments on a BMW 3 Series lease at $740. Fourth, a cascade of charges to DraftKings, FanDuel, and BetMegam totaling over $30,000 in the first year alone. By month 20, the insurance money was gone. That's when Derek came to me about Tyler. The The colonial house, purchased with fraud proceeds, was flagged for seizure under the state's asset forfeiture statute. The court appointed a receiver to manage the property pending disposition. On a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after the arraignment, a locksmith changed the locks and a notice was posted on the front door. I drove past the house that afternoon. Not to gloat. I needed to pick up 3 boxes of Tyler's things that the receiver had set aside. School projects, art supplies, a winter coat that still fit. The house looked the same from the street. Same lawn service. Same 2-car garage. But the notice on the door was visible from the sidewalk, and the neighbor's curtains moved as I loaded the boxes into my truck. I loaded the last box and drove home. Derek's court-appointed standby counsel, Rivera, called me the following week. She was professional and direct. "Mr. Braddock, your son has reconsidered self-representation. He'd like me to negotiate a plea arrangement on his behalf. That's between him and the prosecutor. He asked me to relay a message. I'm listening. He said he's sorry. He said he understands if you can't forgive him, but he wants you to know he's sorry about Janet." I held the phone against my ear and looked at the kitchen wall. Janet's photograph. Tyler's drawings. The cabin 7 pictures I'd taken from the tree line. 3 years of evidence, mapped and pinned and cross-referenced. "Tell him I heard him," I said. Marsh offered a deal. Guilty plea on insurance fraud and the false report charges. Up to 11 years, possibility of parole after 7. As part of the agreement, the coercive control charges would be reclassified as aggravating sentencing factors, rather than prosecuted as standalone counts, contingent on Derek providing a full accounting of the scheme, including how he'd coached Rachel into compliance, how he'd maintained the cabin arrangement. Derek took the deal. Rivera called to tell me. His sentencing was scheduled for January. Rachel's supervised visit with Derek happened on a Wednesday afternoon at the detention center. Ruiz arranged it through the prosecutor's office with conditions: no discussion of pending charges, no contact regarding testimony, and a detective present throughout. I drove Rachel to the facility. She wore a blue sweater she'd bought with money I'd given her for necessities, and her hair was clean and brushed. Her hands gripped her knees in the passenger seat. "You don't have to do this," I said. "I know. Nobody would blame you for waiting until after sentencing. I've waited 3 years, Pop. I'm done waiting." I walked her to the lobby. Ruiz met us inside and led Rachel through the security checkpoint. I stayed in the waiting room. Plastic chairs. Vending machine with a broken coin slot. A television on the wall playing a local news program with the sound off. The clock on the wall ticked through each minute. I counted them the way I used to count, seconds before entering a structure. 22 minutes later, Rachel came back through the security door. Her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. She walked to where I was sitting and stood in front of me. "He cried," she said. "What did you say to him?" "I told him I planted bulbs at your cabin. Tulips. Janet's variety. I told him Tyler drew a picture of our new house. Not a cabin in the woods. A house with a porch and a garden and an open door." She paused. "I told him Tyler holds his pencil wrong and I get to see it every day now." "What did he say?" "Nothing. He just sat there with his hand on his ear and cried." She picked up her coat from the chair beside me. "Let's go home." The sentencing came in January, on a morning cold enough to freeze the puddles in the courthouse parking lot. Judge Harmon presided. The courtroom was fuller than the arraignment. Regional press occupied the back rows. The true crime blog from Richmond had sent a reporter. Collinsville residents, I recognized from decades of living in this town, sat in clusters, watching with the quiet attention of people who'd discovered that someone they knew was someone they didn't. Derek stood before the judge in his orange jumpsuit, Rivera beside him. He'd lost weight, face thinner, hair uncombed, hands hanging at his sides. Marsh presented the state's case in summary. The staged drowning. The insurance claim, the false report. The 3 years of coercive control. The financial exploitation of a grieving father. She cited Chen's forensic accounting, the cell tower records, the rental agreement, the notebooks, Tyler's drawings. Each piece of evidence named and entered. Harmon asked Derek if he wished to make a statement before sentencing. He stood for a moment without speaking. Then he turned and looked at me. "I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. For Mom." 2 sentences, 12 words. They hung in the courtroom air. Harmon sentenced him. Insurance fraud, 8 years. Filing a false missing persons report, 2 years, concurrent. Misuse of emergency services, 1 year, concurrent. The coercive control finding added 3 years as an aggravating enhancement on the base charge. Total, 11 years. Possibility of parole after 7, contingent on completion of a rehabilitative program and restitution compliance. The insurance company's civil recovery judgment stood at $312,000. Derek would carry that debt for the rest of his life. He was led from the courtroom through the side door. His plastic sandals scuffed on the tile floor. The door closed behind him. I sat in the second row and listened to the courtroom empty. Chairs creaking, footsteps on the marble floor. The reporter from Richmond asking the prosecutor a question in the hallway. Ruiz found me on the courthouse steps again. Same spot as the arraignment. Different weather. "It's done," she said. "For now, the family court review is next week." Rachel's attorney filed the reunification petition. "Given the criminal disposition and the emergency custody arrangement, I expect approval. Thank you, Detective, for all of it." Ruiz shook my hand. Her grip was firm. "You built this case, Captain. I just carried it across the finish line." She walked to her car. I walked to mine. The drive home took 40 minutes. The roads were icy in the shaded stretches where the sun hadn't reached. I drove the speed limit and kept both hands on the wheel. When I pulled into the gravel drive, the cabin looked different. Not the structure. The structure was the same 2-bedroom box I'd bought 3 years ago to disappear into. But the porch had flower boxes now, empty in January, waiting. Blue curtains showed in Tyler's window. A light burned in the kitchen. I walked inside. Tyler was at the table doing homework, his pencil gripped wrong, tongue between his teeth. Rachel stood at the counter, cutting carrots, Janet's recipe card propped against the backsplash. The air smelled like pot roast and onions, and something I hadn't been able to name until now. It smelled like a house with people in it. Tyler looked up. "Grandpa, how do you spell hypothesis?" "HYYPOTHISI. That's a lot of letters. Big word." He went back to writing. Rachel's knife tapped against the cutting board in a steady rhythm. The light through the kitchen window was low and gold, the winter sun already dropping toward the tree line. I hung my coat on the hook by the door, sat in the chair across from Tyler. The wall behind him still held the photographs and drawings I'd pinned there during the investigation. Cabin 7, Tyler's crayon drawing. Janet and Rachel in the garden. Evidence, all of it. But evidence of what? Not just Derek's crime. Evidence that someone had been paying attention. That an old man with aching knees and a dead wife's ring around his neck had looked at the pieces and refused to stop until they fit. I reached up and unpinned Tyler's crayon drawing, the one from Derek's trash can. The cabin in the woods, with the green door and the flowers and the bird on the railing. The tape pulled away from the wall with a soft sound, leaving 4 small holes in the plaster. I held it in my hands for a moment, then folded it and put it in the kitchen drawer with Janet's recipe cards. Rachel saw me do it. Her knife stopped. "You keeping that?" It's his, I said. He should have it when he's ready. She nodded and went back to the carrots. Tyler finished his homework and started a new drawing. This one had a porch with flower boxes and two people sitting on the steps. One tall, one small. Between them, a red bird with a bent tail. The cabin door behind them was open. That's us, Grandpa. I can see that. And that's the cardinal. He comes every morning. 7 o'clock, I said. Like clockwork. Tyler grinned and kept drawing. His pencil moved with the careful attention of a boy who'd learned that the things you put on paper can be more real than the things people tell you. Outside, the January light faded behind the pines. The pot roast simmered on the stove. Rachel hummed something I didn't recognize, then stopped and started again, and I realized it was the melody Janet used to hum while she gardened. The same tune, carried forward. I touched the ring through my shirt. Warm from my skin, the colonial on the cul-de-sac would be sold at auction in March. The BMW was gone. The sports betting accounts were closed. The podcasts Derek used to listen to, the ones where he graded criminals on their mistakes, had no audience left. The house that held them no longer belonged to anyone. He'd wanted my money without earning it. Called me confused. Let his mother die, believing a lie. Locked his wife in a cabin and used his son as a chain. Now the money was in a trust he'd never touch. The confused old man had built the case that put him away. The wife was free. The son was drawing pictures of open doors. Tyler held up his drawing. The porch, the flower boxes, the cardinal, the two figures holding hands. Can we put it on the wall? I took it from him and pinned it where the investigation photographs had been. Center of the wall. Eye level. The tape held. Rachel set the pot roast on the table. Steam rose from the dish. Tyler pulled his chair closer, fork already in his hand. Grandpa, will you say grace? I looked at my grandson across the table. At Rachel standing beside him, her hand on the back of his chair. At Janet's recipe card, propped against the backsplash, her handwriting still legible after all these years. Thank you, I said, for this food, for this table, for the people sitting at it. Tyler nodded, satisfied. He picked up his fork. We ate. Feeling connected to my revenge? Hit like and give me a score from 1 to 10. Explain in the comments. 6 months after the sentencing, the cabin had changed. Not the bones. The bones were the same 2-bedroom box I'd bought to disappear into. But the garage workshop where I'd spent 3 years polishing brass in the dark was now Tyler's bedroom, and the antique fire extinguishers lined the living room walls in glass-fronted display cases I'd built from oak and quarter-inch plate. The afternoon light through the front windows put a shine on every piece. The 1923 Purine, the 1911 Badgers with its silver soldered seam, a matched pair of copper soda acid models from 1887 that I'd found at an estate sale in Roanoke the year Janet died. Tyler liked the oldest ones best. He'd stand on his toes and press his nose to the glass and ask how they worked, and I'd explain the chemistry the way Captain Welch had explained fire to me 43 years ago. Start simple. Build from there. Rachel started the garden in April, the week the ground thawed. She worked the soil along the south-facing wall of the cabin, where the sun hit earliest and stayed longest. The tulip bulbs she'd pressed into the cold dirt back in November came up first. Red and yellow, the same varieties Janet grew on Elm Street. Rachel knelt beside them with her trowel and her bare hands, turning the earth the way my wife had shown her, testing the moisture between her fingers. Tyler helped after school. He carried the seed packets from the porch and read the labels aloud while Rachel dug the rows. His handwriting had improved. The school counselor, Patricia Holt, said he was talking more in class, raising his hand, eating lunch with 2 boys from his bus route. His pencil grip was still wrong. Rachel and I had given up mentioning it. Grandpa, This one says, full sun, Tyler said, holding up a packet of marigold seeds. Is this full sun? I looked at the patch of ground where he was standing. The tree line threw shade past 4 o'clock, but the morning and midday exposure was clear. Close enough. He pressed the seeds into the row Rachel had dug, spacing them the way she'd taught him, 1 thumb width apart. His tongue poked between his teeth when he concentrated. Same as his mother. Same as mine, according to Janet, though I'd never believed her. Rachel's voice had changed in the months since leaving the cabin. Not louder, firmer. The hesitations were fewer. She still apologized for things that didn't need apologies, reaching for the salt at dinner, asking to use the washing machine, taking the last piece of bread, but the reflexive flinch was fading. Some mornings, I heard her singing in the kitchen before Tyler woke up, the same melody Janet hummed while she gardened. She'd stop when she noticed me listening. I pretended not to notice. Her spiral notebooks stayed in the kitchen drawer with Janet's recipe cards. 4 of them, returned by the court after the evidence was catalogued. 1 sentence a day for 3 years. She hadn't opened them since they came back. The sentences she wanted to say to Tyler. She said to his face now, over breakfast, in the garden, at bedtime, when she tucked him in, and he told her about his day. The cardinal found us. Same bird, same bent tail feather, angled left instead of straight back. It appeared on the new porch railing the 2nd week of April, and came back every morning around 7. Tyler timed it with the kitchen clock. He kept a tally in his school notebook, each morning marked with a red check mark and the time. 7:02, 6:58, 7:01. The bird hadn't missed a day since Tyler started counting. I still restored extinguishers in the evenings. The workbench had moved to a corner of the living room, near the display cases. The shop light put the same warm circle on the brass that it had in the garage. The smell of metal polish hung in the air, mixing with whatever Rachel had been cooking. Tyler handed me tools while I worked. He knew the names now. Number 12 wrench. Needle nose pliers. The small brass brush for cleaning valve threads. This one's old, Grandpa. 1898. Hayward's hand grenade model. Glass globe filled with carbon tetrachloride. You threw it at the base of the fire, and the glass broke. You threw it? That was the idea. Cool. He handed me the brass brush without being asked. His fingers were careful with the old parts. Patient. The same patience I'd spent 33 years learning from fire scenes, and another 3 learning from grief. The porch light came on at dusk, an automatic timer I'd wired the week Rachel moved in. The bulb was warm white, the kind that doesn't wash out the colors of the garden in the last light. Rachel had hung a wind chime from the porch beam, a small one, copper tubes that rang in a minor key when the evening air moved through the pines. I sat on the porch after Tyler and Rachel went inside. We'd done the dishes. Tyler had finished his homework. Rachel had read him 2 chapters of a book about a boy who raised pigeons, and I'd heard their voices through the thin wall, rising and falling, the sound of a story being shared. Rachel came back out with 2 mugs of tea and handed me one. She sat on the step below mine and looked at the garden. The marigolds should be up by next week, she said. Janet always said they were the easy ones. Rachel nodded. The wind chime rang once, a single copper note that faded into the pines. I touched Janet's ring through my shirt. The garden waited in the dark, rows of turned earth and new green shoots. The tulips closed for the night. The marigold seeds still underground. Rachel would test the soil in the morning. I would make coffee and sit at the table where I'd once spread evidence photographs and case files. The pot roast recipe was pinned to the kitchen wall now, in the spot where cabin 7 used to be. The house smelled like Sunday again,